Have you ever wondered if what people call love is really just a fear of being alone? Maybe the desire to have someone is really a way to avoid facing the emptiness inside yourself. Maybe what we call relationships are often just ways to run away from ourselves. The truth is, nothing shows us more than the discomfort we feel when we are alone. The Stoics suggested imagining yourself on your deathbed, in a silent room, feeling the weight of your life, and asking, did I truly live my own life, or did I just exist in the shadow of someone else? They also warned us not to give up our inner freedom, because the chains we accept willingly are the hardest to break. We often dress these chains in romance, companionship, or the illusion of being complete. But deep down, something keeps burning inside, whispering that we were meant for more. If you've ever felt that whisper, if you've sensed that truth beneath the surface of your relationships, then this message is for you. Most people don't fall in love because they feel whole. They fall in love because they are afraid of the silence that comes when the noise stops. That silence forces you to hear your own thoughts and confront questions you have been avoiding for years. Many people feel an empty space in their lives that is too wide, too echoing, too raw, so they fill it with another person. Not always because they truly want that person, but because it is easier than facing themselves. Much of what we call love is really just avoidance. It is easier to get lost in someone else's stories, emotions, and needs than to deal with our own. Carl Jung said, loneliness does not come from having no people around you, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to you. For many, a relationship is not a bridge to true connection. It is a shield from loneliness, a way to pretend they are understood even when they have never truly understood themselves. The problem is that when love is based on fear, it becomes fragile. Every argument feels like a threat. Every moment of distance feels like a crack in the relationship. People start carrying the impossible burden of holding together not just two lives but also all the unresolved parts of each person. When cracks appear, panic sets in. People cling harder, give up their own values, silence their desires, and reshape themselves to keep the other person from leaving. That is not love. It is a survival tactic, a way to avoid being alone with the very silence they are running from. In love based on fear, people seek validation, acceptance, and approval, and in the process, they trade away the honesty that could help them grow. This is why so many lose themselves in relationships without even realizing it. The process starts small, with little compromises like where to eat, what to watch, or how to spend weekends. At first, it feels harmless, even like partnership. But then the compromises grow. People hold back parts of themselves, stop chasing certain dreams, and adjust their personality, not because they want to, but because they are afraid being fully themselves might cost the relationship. Over time, the person they were becomes hard to recognize, even to themselves. Marcus Aurelius reminded us, it is not death that a man should fear, but he should fear never beginning to live. And that is the quiet tragedy. So many stop truly living because they are afraid of losing someone. When love is built on fear, it takes away the very freedom that love is supposed to bring. True, healthy love should help you stand taller, not shrink smaller. It should strengthen your individuality, not weaken it. When fear takes control, love stops being free and becomes a set of unspoken rules. Don't be too much, don't change too fast, don't disturb the balance, even if that balance quietly suffocates you. People tell themselves this is normal, that it is the price of being with someone, but the cost is much higher than they realize. They pay with their authenticity, creativity, growth, and all of it is exchanged for the comfort of not facing themselves. Ironically, the silence they run from is not their enemy. It is their teacher. In solitude, the noise fades, and you begin to hear your true voice again. At first, it is uncomfortable. You hear doubts, fears, regrets. But if you stay with it, you also hear your values, your calling, your truth. Carl Jung said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. You cannot do that if you are always drowning in someone else's presence or shaping every thought just to keep the peace. The fear behind love is rarely about losing the other person. It is more often about losing the distraction they provide. When that distraction is removed, you are left with yourself, and for many, that is the scariest meeting of all. But it is also the meeting that changes everything. Once you can sit in your own silence without needing to escape it, You stop relying on others to make you feel whole. You stop giving away your identity for the sake of belonging. You begin to love by choice, not necessity. That is the kind of love that cannot be broken by absence or distance because it is built on freedom, not fear. Facing silence takes courage. It means stopping the habit of reaching for someone just to avoid yourself. But this courage lays the foundation for a life where love is a gift, not a crutch, where being with someone is a deliberate choice, not an unconscious escape, and where you can walk away from what does not serve you, not because you do not care, but because you care too much about not abandoning yourself. Fear behind love will keep you running in circles. Facing it will set you free. Freedom, as the Stoics taught, is the one possession no one can take from you. From the moment we understand words, the story begins. Comes in bedtime tales, movies, and the way adults talk about life. Grow up, meet someone, fall in love, settle down. It is presented as the ultimate destination, the final chapter, the happy ending. Few ever stop to ask what happens after the scene fades to black. Even fewer question whether this story serves everyone or whether it quietly robs us of the chance to meet the most important person we will ever know, ourselves. This conditioning is not obvious. It is quiet, subtle. It hides in questions from relatives like, "When are you going to meet someone?" As if life is just a waiting room for love. It hides in compliments that compare your worth to your relationship status. By the time we are adults, this message is no longer questioned. It is absorbed, unnoticed, like gravity. The result is profound. Many adults grow up believing that life without a partner is incomplete. They travel, learn, build careers, but somewhere in the back of their mind, the idea that they are not whole alone quietly lingers. There is often a quiet, unspoken reminder that life is just a placeholder until we find someone. Because of this, many people enter relationships not because they are ready or fully know themselves, but because they feel obligated to follow the story they were told as children. Carl Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." For many, being in a relationship is a way to avoid that terrifying self-work. If someone else validates us, we don't have to fully validate ourselves. If someone else shows us our value, we don't have to face the silence that asks us to define it on our own. This hidden conditioning affects not just who we choose, but also how we act once we are in a relationship. If we are taught that our worth depends on being partnered, we often tolerate situations that hurt us just to avoid being alone. We ignore red flags, accept disrespect, or change ourselves to fit someone else's ideal, rather than face the shame of ending up single. Marcus Aurelius reminded us, "It is not the things themselves that disturb us, but our judgments about them." In this case, the judgment is subtle but powerful. Being alone equals failure. Being with someone equals success. This false equation keeps countless people trapped in lives that don't reflect who they truly are. The story we are told about relationships doesn't account for individuality. It is one size fits all, even though people are very different. Some thrive in committed partnerships. Others need long periods of solitude to grow fully. But society rarely allows space for the second group. Solitude is labeled as loneliness, and loneliness is treated as a problem to be fixed quickly. Over time, this pressure moves inside us. Even when no one is around, we feel restless in our own company, as if not being with someone means we are wasting time. Gradually, this restlessness becomes the background noise of life. We measure progress not by how well we know ourselves, but by how close we are to fulfilling the cultural script. The danger of living by this script is that it discourages deep self-exploration. If the goal is already set, why wander off the path? Why question whether the destination fits who you are becoming? The conditioning implies that discovering yourself comes second to finding someone else. In the process, it encourages abandoning parts of yourself that don't fit neatly into a relationship story. You may suppress ambitions, interests, or unique ideas because they make it harder to fit the mold. In this way, the story doesn't just shape your relationships. It shapes your identity. Jung described individuation as the process of becoming your true self, the central task of life. This journey needs time, space, and the courage to stand apart from the crowd. But the hidden conditioning tells you the opposite, that you must merge, pair off, and tie your life to someone else as soon as possible. This creates a tension. Individuation asks you to turn inward, while the cultural script demands you look outward. Many people spend decades caught in this tension, pulled away from their own growth by the pressure of expectation. It's not that love or companionship is wrong. The problem is when it becomes compulsory, when it is pursued reflexively without asking whether you are ready, or whether the person you are becoming fits the role you have been taught to play. Relationships entered under this weight often reflect the conditioning itself. Safe, familiar, but unchallenging. They may feel comfortable, but they will not reveal the full truth of who you are. And the tragedy is that by the time you notice this, you have often spent years shaping yourself around someone else's expectations instead of discovering yourself. Over the years, the person you could have become may start to feel distant, almost unreachable. The first step to breaking free from this conditioning is awareness, seeing the story you've been told as just that, a story, not an unchangeable rule. When you realize you are free to write your own script, the pressure to find someone fades. You begin to see being single not as a lack, but as a rare opportunity. An open space where you can plant ideas, dreams, and parts of yourself that would never survive living solely for someone else's approval. The Stoics would call this living in accordance with nature, aligning your life with your own nature, not the artificial story handed down to you. Breaking free doesn't mean rejecting love forever. It means refusing to let the fear of being alone control your life. It means choosing to know yourself deeply before sharing yourself with someone else. When you finally meet someone from a place of wholeness, you won't be seeking them to fill a void. You'll be inviting them to walk beside you on a path you've already made your own. That is the kind of connection no conditioning can create because it comes from freedom, not fear. This process doesn't happen in one dramatic moment. It is slow and subtle. It often starts with tiny compromises. Skipping something you wanted to do because it doesn't fit the plan, softening your opinion to avoid friction, telling yourself that avoiding a small argument is what maturity or love looks like. At first, it feels harmless, even noble. But over time, these small concessions add up, and the person you were begins to fade. Not because anyone demanded it, but because you gave it away little by little without noticing. The change is so subtle that you barely feel it. You adapt to keep the peace, protect the bond you think you cannot live without. And while compromise is part of any relationship, there is a difference between adapting and erasing yourself. When you start filtering your thoughts before speaking or swallowing your desires because they might cause discomfort, you are trading authenticity for security. The Stoics warned against this kind of bargain. Seneca wrote, "He who is brave is free." True freedom means being able to exist fully without constantly editing yourself to fit someone else's expectations. But when love becomes a stage where you are always rehearsing the right lines, freedom quietly slips away. This loss is hard to notice because it often feels like growth. You tell yourself that you are becoming less selfish, more understanding, more flexible. And sometimes you are, but there is a line between genuine growth and shrinking yourself. When that line blurs, you may not realize you are shrinking until it is far behind you. Little things start to appear. You laugh less like you used to. You spend less time on the interests that once made you feel alive. You hesitate to speak what is truly on your mind. Alone, these small changes may not seem serious, but together they quietly erode your sense of self. You become a version of yourself shaped to fit someone else's comfort. What makes this erosion dangerous is that it is self-inflicted. Rarely does someone directly ask you to disappear. Instead, you do it in hopes of keeping the connection. You believe, often without saying it, that love is maintained by removing your sharp edges, becoming easier to live with, and being agreeable even when it costs you something essential. Over months or years, the person staring back in the mirror feels familiar but distant. You recognize the outline, but the inner fire, the unique combination of thoughts, desires, and expressions that made you who you are has dimmed. This slow disappearance doesn't only happen in romantic relationships. It can also occur in friendships, families, or any close connection where you feel pressure to adjust or disappear to maintain harmony. This slow disappearance doesn't just happen in romantic relationships. It can happen in friendships, families, and even workplaces. Anywhere the pressure to fit in is stronger than the courage to be yourself. Because the change happens gradually, it often feels normal. You tell yourself that everyone compromises, that maybe this is just the cost of being connected. But deep down, a quiet restlessness stirs. It's the part of you that remembers a time when you felt fully alive in your own skin, unedited and unapologetic. The painful truth is that disappearing like this doesn't make the bond stronger. It weakens it. Relationships built on partial truths and filtered selves are fragile. You may keep the peace on the surface, but resentment quietly grows, and the connection becomes less about real closeness and more about maintaining appearances. Marcus Aurelius said, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." If your thoughts are always shaped to avoid conflict, your soul gradually takes on the muted colors of avoidance, losing the vibrancy that made you unique. Reclaiming yourself doesn't mean refusing to compromise entirely. It means remembering that the truest form of love, romantic, platonic, or self-love, works best when both people remain whole. It means being kind without erasing your boundaries and being loving without silencing your truth. The courage to be fully yourself may sometimes create tension, but tension is not the enemy. As the Stoics taught, challenges are training grounds for strength. A relationship that cannot handle your authenticity is not one that can truly hold you. The slow disappearance feels safe, but that safety is an illusion if it costs your life force. You are not meant to become a softened, palatable version of yourself just to preserve an idea of love. Love that asks for your absence is not love. It is a contract for slow self-abandonment. When you finally see this, you realize that the greatest gift you can give any relationship is your full self, unshaped by fear and uncut by compromise. The moment you stop disappearing, you stop trading your life for someone else's comfort, and you start living it as it was meant to be lived, whole, present, and unmistakably yours. Belonging is one of the deepest human desires. We are wired to seek it, but true belonging comes not from losing yourself to others, but from standing fully in your own life while connecting with them honestly. Humans naturally want to belong, to feel anchored in a place, a group, or with a person. There is comfort in knowing there is somewhere to return to, someone who calls you theirs, a life that feels shared instead of lonely. But what we often don't notice is the quiet cost of belonging when it isn't based on true freedom. This cost is rarely demanded directly. Instead, it appears as a constant, almost invisible negotiation of your thoughts, desires, and even who you are. Over time, you learn which parts of yourself are accepted and which need to be hidden. The more you hide, the safer you seem to feel, even as something essential in you begins to fade. The safety of belonging often comes with rules, some spoken, most unspoken. Certain opinions are better left unsaid to avoid conflict. Some ambitions are toned down because they threaten the balance. Even emotions are measured so they don't make others uncomfortable. Gradually, you begin to live in a middle ground. Never too much, never too little, always adjusting to fit the space you occupy. Epictetus said, "If you wish to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." But belonging often makes us unwilling to be misunderstood. We choose smoothness over honesty, acceptance over self-expression, and repeating that choice slowly reshapes us. What makes this cost so subtle is that it often feels like love. You tell yourself you are compromising because you care, because you are a good partner, friend, or family member. Sometimes that is true. But the line between healthy compromise and losing yourself is thin. Belonging pushes you toward the latter without you noticing. One day, you realize you no longer say what you think unless it's safe. You stop chasing certain dreams because they don't fit the shared plan. You become careful, measured, less spontaneous, not because you wanted to change, but because change threatens the approval you've worked hard to secure. The cost of belonging is rarely dramatic. It is paid in small, almost invisible installments. The joke you didn't make, the truth you didn't speak, the risk you didn't take because it would require explaining yourself to someone who wouldn't understand. Each of these small compromises may seem minor on their own, but together they form a pattern. Over time, you start living not for your own clarity or authenticity, but for the stability of the group or relationship. You trade parts of your individuality for a sense of security, believing that the more you give, the more you will belong. If your thoughts are always adjusted to match what others expect, your soul gradually loses its unique color. Choosing to stay single or spend time in solitude allows you to keep full ownership of your thoughts, desires, and essence without constantly negotiating with others. This isn't about isolation. It's about sovereignty, knowing that every choice comes from your own center, not from calculating how it will be received. Connection itself is not dangerous. Love, friendship, and community can be powerful sources of growth and joy, but only if they allow you to be fully present. When belonging requires constant self-editing, it's not real connection. It's a subtle form of control. Control, even gentle, limits your ability to live as yourself. Jung believed that becoming whole, a process he called individuation, can't happen when your sense of self depends on others' approval. You can't integrate the hidden parts of yourself if you're always shaping them to belong. Choosing yourself over the comfort of belonging isn't easy. It can mean standing apart, breaking unspoken rules, or letting go of relationships that cannot hold your truth. It can mean moments of loneliness that feel sharper than expected. But it also means living without the constant weight of adjusting, without your voice and vision slowly fading. In that freedom, something remarkable happens. You begin to belong to yourself in a way no one can take away. The cost of belonging is real, but so is the reward of keeping your life in your own hands. Staying single doesn't mean rejecting love or connection. It means refusing to trade your essence for them. It means that when you do choose to belong somewhere, it will be on your terms as your whole self without shrinking to fit. Belonging is sweetest when it doesn't come at the expense of who you are, and freedom once claimed makes every other kind of connection richer, deeper, and more genuine. When you strip away the constant hum of other people's voices, something unexpected rises in its place. Being alone can feel unsettling at first. The silence feels almost too loud, and you notice thoughts you didn't realize were there. Ideas buried under conversations, obligations, and the constant presence of others. Alone, there is no distraction, and these thoughts surface with intensity, like a messy room suddenly lit by a harsh light. Carl Jung said, "Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes." Solitude forces that awakening. It asks you to turn inward and face what you've been avoiding. At first, it can feel uncomfortable, but hidden inside that discomfort is clarity. Over days and weeks, your thoughts become sharper, and your own voice becomes easier to hear. Without constantly shaping your ideas to fit others, your mind stretches further and bolder. You explore thoughts and paths you might have ignored before, because they didn't align with someone else's plan or comfort. Your inner world expands, full of details and connections that were invisible when you were adapting to others. People rarely talk about this part of being alone. How your mind sharpens when it isn't diluted by others. Solitude may feel like a loss at first. No partner to share your day with, no one to consult, no immediate echo of your words. But soon you see it differently. The absence isn't emptiness. It is space. Pure, unclaimed, unmeasured space. Space has a way of revealing truth. Marcus Aurelius said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." In solitude, that truth becomes undeniable. You stop depending on others for validation, guidance, and worth. They come from within instead. The more time you spend in this space, the more it changes you. At first, you may fill the silence with noise, music, screens, or talking to anyone who will listen. But gradually, you let the silence be. You learn that not all thoughts need to be drowned out, and that some discomfort in stillness is simply the process of meeting yourself again. In that stillness, your desires and clarity become sharper. When you spend time alone, you begin to realize which dreams are truly yours and which were influenced by others' expectations. You feel drawn to things that matter to you but that you had forgotten. Solitude starts to feel less uncomfortable and more rewarding, not because you want to avoid people, but because you've experienced the freedom of living without constant compromise. This kind of alone time brings energy and focus. It's not the loneliness that comes from rejection or loss. It's chosen and deliberate, rooted in self-respect. The Stoics would call this living according to your nature, following your own inner compass. You notice how much of your life before was spent reacting to others, their moods, plans, or needs. Now your energy goes toward creating, exploring your own ideas, and following your own curiosity. You're not holding back because someone might misunderstand you or tempering your excitement to maintain balance. Time feels different in solitude. There's room to think deeply and pursue ideas fully. You can work at midnight because inspiration strikes or follow a sudden thought without needing to explain yourself. You see how much energy you used to spend managing relationships, and now it's yours to invest where it truly matters. Solitude isn't always easy. Some days the quiet feels heavy, and you long for someone's presence. But even those moments teach you to stand with your own mind, building strength and self-reliance. Over time, being alone begins to feel like home. The connections you form with others, with your work, and with the world become richer because they grow from this foundation. You stop fearing being alone because you've seen what can exist in that space. Once you experience the clarity, focus, and freedom that come from standing fully in yourself, you protect that space, not as a wall but as solid ground. When you belong to yourself, no one else can take that away. From childhood, we are told stories that promise we will find someone who completes us, that we aren't whole without a partner. At first, this seems comforting, even romantic. But underneath it is the dangerous belief that we are incomplete alone. When you believe that, you start living as though your value and stability depend on someone else. Decisions start to revolve around attracting or keeping another person. You may limit your ambitions or hide parts of yourself that don't fit the idea of a perfect partner. Over time, your sense of identity shifts from what feels true to you to what will secure the relationship. This isn't love, it's dependence disguised as devotion. Dependence feels safe because it promises security, but it comes at a cost. You begin measuring yourself not by your own standards, but by how well you fit into someone else's life. You ignore the quiet signals from within, your dissatisfaction, curiosity, and unspoken dreams, because you are focused on maintaining that false sense of safety. When people base their happiness on others, they give away their freedom. Epictetus said, "If you want to be free, then wish for nothing that depends on others." Depending on someone else for your sense of self or completeness shrinks your freedom. If you believe you are incomplete without another person, relationships stop being a choice and start feeling like lifelines. Losing someone then doesn't just feel like sadness. It feels like losing a part of yourself. That's why people stay in relationships that no longer serve them, ignoring their instincts and needs. They think leaving would make them less whole. But the truth is, you were never half of anything. You have always been a complete person capable of love, purpose, and creation without needing to fuse yourself to someone else. The sense of wholeness you look for outside can only be built from within. This belief often comes from culture. Society idealizes couples and families as the highest achievements, while single life is treated as a waiting room to escape. Even the language we use, like settling down, implies life is only complete in partnership. But this leaves out an important truth. Being in a relationship does not guarantee fulfillment, and being single is not a lack. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that very little is needed for a happy life. It comes from within. The myth of incompleteness keeps people searching outside when the real work is inward. Breaking free from this doesn't mean rejecting relationships. It means approaching them from self-sufficiency instead of need. When you see yourself as whole, love becomes a choice rather than a dependency. You can give without losing yourself and receive without making it your identity. This kind of love is richer and deeper because it exists between two complete people who can stand alone if needed. Carl Jung understood this too. True connection only happens when both people have faced their own inner world instead of using each other to escape it. Choosing wholeness can feel lonely at first because it requires facing all your flaws, strengths, and unrealized potential without the constant validation of a relationship. Dependence feels easier, which is why most avoid this work. But when you build a life that feels complete on its own, the fear of being alone fades, and your self-worth stops swinging with the opinions of others. The relationships you form after that aren't meant to fill a void. They're meant to share abundance. The myth of incompleteness is powerful because it has been repeated for generations, but the real truth is simple and freeing. You are not half of anything. You are a complete, capable being. When you live from that place, you no longer tolerate relationships that ask you to shrink. Love stops being an antidote to your existence and becomes a complement to it. Dependence loses its hold, individuality is restored, and your life stops being a search for what's missing. It becomes the creation of something fully whole on your own. Society often makes its preferences clear without saying them directly. People celebrate milestones like buying a house, getting married, or having children as signs of success. These events make life predictable, easy to understand, and easy to fit into a familiar pattern. When you're part of a couple, others think they know what will happen next. But if you step outside that pattern and live fully single, you become harder to define. Your choices aren't obvious, and that unpredictability can make people uncomfortable because it signals freedom. Freedom that can't be controlled. Society values stability and predictability, offering acceptance in exchange for following the expected path. Being in a couple usually comes with a shared rhythm of compromises and plans, which is fine unless it drowns out your own desires. A thriving single person, however, follows their own rhythm. They make choices without needing anyone's approval and move in ways that can't be predicted. That unpredictability comes from autonomy. No one else controls your decisions, and you are free to take risks, follow inspiration, or chase opportunities that only make sense to you. This freedom is powerful, though it can unsettle others, who may ask questions like, "Don't you want someone to share your life?" Or, "Aren't you afraid of being alone?" These questions assume life outside a couple is incomplete. But chosen solitude isn't a lack. It's a luxury, a space where self-determination grows without interruption. What unsettles people most is that a thriving single person is content alone. If you're miserable alone, society feels validated. But if you thrive alone, you challenge the idea that fulfillment only comes with a partner, and others begin questioning the compromises they've made. Carl Jung noted that the toughest conflicts, once faced, leave a sense of calm and security that others can't easily replicate. Thriving singles gain this calm by confronting societal expectations head-on. Unpredictability also builds resilience. Without depending on someone else to define who you are, change doesn't shake you. You adapt easily, move fluidly through life's disruptions, and seize opportunities without losing your sense of self. The difference between the herd and the outlier isn't about relationships, it's about agency. The herd follows patterns laid by others for safety, while the outlier steps off the path, knowing it may be unpredictable but entirely their own. In doing so, they claim a rare kind of freedom, the right to live on their own terms. Thriving singles see unpredictability not as chaos, but as potential, a chance to shape their life by choice rather than default. They aren't rejecting connection. They reject connection that comes at the cost of individuality. In a world that rewards predictability, refusing to be easily defined is both a rebellion and a declaration. I belong to myself first. This self-possession can't be given or taken. It must be earned and protected. And once you have it, you realize it is one of the rarest forms of power. After all, the greatest ideas rarely come when your mind is crowded by noise. Creative ideas rarely grow in noisy, busy spaces filled with other people's expectations. They appear in quiet moments when the world feels distant and no one is demanding your attention. There's a certain energy in those times. The long nights spent lost in thought or the calm mornings when you wake without obligations. In solitude, your mind is free to explore without permission, discovering connections it wouldn't make under an audience's gaze. Carl Jung said, "Solitude is for me a fountain of healing which makes my life worth living." He understood that creation isn't just about inspiration, it needs space. Alone, you can follow an idea without explaining why it matters, dive deep into it for hours or even days, and explore without interference. That freedom strengthens your creative edge because you're not adjusting your pace or choices to accommodate someone else. Crowded spaces, whether physical or emotional, pull your attention outward. You notice others' expectations, reactions, and judgments. While awareness of others can help in collaboration, it can harm certain types of thought that need to be unruly, free, and untouched by outside influence. Solitude removes the need for approval. You create not to be seen a certain way, but because something inside demands it. Seneca noted that withdrawing from the world isn't avoidance. It's preservation, protecting fragile ideas until they are strong enough to face the world. Without expectations, solitude becomes fertile ground for creativity. You can explore strange, impractical, or even absurd ideas. You might write something never published, sketch something unseen, or experiment without fear of public failure. Solitude acts like a laboratory for imagination where mistakes are allowed, even necessary. Without someone else's constant lens, you can take risks that would otherwise feel too exposed. There's also a rhythm to being alone that nurtures creativity. Without interruptions from shared life, you can enter a state of flow, where time disappears and you are completely absorbed in your work. You don't have to stop mid-thought to answer a message or explain why you're still working. When you spend time alone, it allows your mind to go deeper into the creative process. Sometimes the ideas or work that come from this state cannot be forced. They emerge naturally. Marcus Aurelius said, "Nowhere you can go is more peaceful, more free of interruptions than your own soul. In that quiet space, your best work often appears." The creative power of being alone isn't just about producing more. It's about creating work that feels genuine and true. Without others around, you stop copying, stop shaping your ideas to fit what's popular, and stop editing before you even start. What comes out is raw, unfiltered, and fully yours. Even if it's not perfect, it carries your unique mark in a way work created under constant influence never can. This authenticity is more valuable than polish because it forms a voice that can't be replicated. Many writers, thinkers, and artists throughout history have chosen solitude not to reject people but because it's essential for their work. Collaboration has its place, but the deepest, most transformative insights often come in quiet moments no one else sees. Alone, you can face your own contradictions, push your limits, and hear truths that are too soft to be noticed in a crowd. These truths might feel uncomfortable at first, but they often reshape everything you create afterward. Solitude gives you space to hear yourself clearly, without interference, and lets you build something before the world tells you how it should be. Once you experience that kind of space, you protect it, not to shut others out, but because you see how much more alive your ideas, your work, and yourself become when given silence to grow. Being away from the constant emotional exchange of close relationships is subtle but powerful. At first, it can feel strange because you're used to checking someone else's emotions before your own. You've adjusted your words, energy, and tone to keep balance or avoid conflict. In solitude, that static clears. You start to realize how much of what you felt wasn't even yours, how other people's highs and lows became yours over time. The irritation or heaviness you carried wasn't permanent. It was left over from managing someone else's feelings. Alone, you can see clearly what belongs to you and what doesn't, and that clarity strengthens both your mind and your work. When you spend time alone, you start to notice feelings and thoughts that aren't filtered through someone else. The Stoics taught that our peace depends on how we judge events, not the events themselves. Alone, your judgments are truly yours. At first, this can feel sharp or unsettling because you're not used to sitting with your emotions without explaining or justifying them to another person. There's no one to reassure you, distract you, or influence how you feel. You begin to feel your excitement, your irritation, and your joy as your own, not shaped by someone else's moods. Gradually, your emotional life stops being a shared space and becomes yours alone. Without someone else's expectations or constant emotional influence, your nervous system settles. You stop waking up braced for emotional surprises or rehearsing conversations. You move through your day without invisible negotiations like, "Should I say this?" or "Will this upset them?" The space left behind is not empty. It is breathable, filled with your own pace, rhythm, and balance. Emotional independence doesn't mean you stop caring about others. It means you stop carrying their emotions in ways that cost you yourself. Alone, you learn to validate your feelings, feel fully without editing for someone else, and communicate to yourself first. When you reconnect with others, it comes from groundedness rather than entanglement. Even joy changes. Your happiness becomes steady and self-generated, no longer amplified or diminished by someone else's state. You notice small pleasures, sunlight in the morning, your own laughter, the calm of your space. This emotional detox isn't always comfortable. You may feel the pull to seek old connections for familiarity. But if you resist, you discover the emptiness was never empty. It was space for your own voice to be heard again. Solitude removes the haze that others unintentionally create around your inner world. You learn to stand at the center of your own emotional weather without being swept away by someone else's storms. Once you feel this clarity, you recognize yourself, and that recognition becomes essential. Living on your own terms often brings labels. Lonely, selfish, incomplete. But those words reflect discomfort in others, not truth. Society likes dependence because it's stable and easy to control. Dependence keeps you in line, but independence makes you unpredictable. Your choices no longer follow fear of being left out or judged. That unpredictability is powerful, and it's no wonder independence is often mislabeled as loneliness by those who can't imagine fulfillment without constant company. People often call independence selfish because you put your own path first instead of following what others expect. They call it incomplete because they believe being whole requires another person. These labels aren't really about you. They're a way society keeps people in line. If independence seems undesirable, fewer people will choose it. If staying single is seen as failure, people rush to couple up, even if it means hiding parts of themselves. True freedom is radical because it refuses to trade authenticity for acceptance. Independence shows that you don't need someone else to validate who you are or make your life feel meaningful. This doesn't mean rejecting love or connection. It means removing need from the equation. Love given freely, without dependence, is one of the purest forms of love. But freedom isn't easy. Being fully responsible for your life can feel heavy. No one else takes the blame for mistakes, and no one else takes the credit for success. That's exactly what makes it real freedom. You own it all. People often fear what they secretly want. Those who criticize your independence may wish they had the courage to claim their own freedom. Standing in your freedom can even challenge others, forcing them to question compromises they've made. When they call you lonely, remember solitude is power. When they call you selfish, remember self-respect is the foundation for every meaningful connection. When they call you incomplete, remember wholeness comes from what you refuse to give away, not what you acquire from others. True independence, or sovereignty, isn't stumbled upon. It's earned. It often comes at the cost of comforts that feel safe. Shared plans, automatic affection, constant companionship, all things that quietly pull you away from yourself. To step into sovereignty, you have to cut some of those strings. In solitude, no one validates or vetoes your decisions. Every choice is yours alone. That freedom can feel both thrilling and terrifying. You must own both the victories and the mistakes with the same steady acceptance. You stop outsourcing responsibility and start carrying your life fully yourself. The Stoics understood this. Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." Solitude becomes a training ground for that mastery. The cost isn't just comfort. It comes in moments of doubt, quiet nights that feel heavier than expected, mornings when you wish for company to share small joys. Sovereignty can feel lonely, not because you lack people, but because you've chosen to stand without depending on them. You learn to be your own anchor, reassure yourself, and sit with discomfort instead of reaching for someone else to fix it. That skill, holding your ground in the absence of external support, becomes one of your greatest strengths. The beauty of being fully independent or sovereign is that it changes every relationship you have. When you're not dependent on anyone, relationships aren't about filling a gap or fixing yourself. Instead, they become choices made from abundance, not need. You invite someone into your life because you want to, not because you feel you have to. Carl Jung talked about individuation, which means becoming whole on your own, and sovereignty is the real-life expression of that wholeness. You can love deeply without fearing that losing someone will make you lose yourself. But the world doesn't encourage this kind of self-rule. It prefers people who rely on each other, because dependent people are easier to manage and predict. A sovereign person is harder to control. You stick to your values and won't stay in situations that stunt your growth. This may make some relationships fade, especially if they were built on your willingness to compromise who you are to keep the peace. Sovereignty also requires facing yourself without distractions. There's no one else to blame if you fail, no one to hide behind if you avoid hard work. You see your flaws, blind spots, and excuses clearly. And in that clarity you have two options. Either change or accept yourself as you are. Both are hard, but either moves you closer to real freedom. The reward is a life that is unmistakably yours. Every choice, every success, every mistake bears your signature. You move through the world without diluting yourself to fit someone else's expectations. Your time, energy, and mind belong entirely to you. Life doesn't become easier, but it becomes fully yours in a way nothing and no one can take from you. Once you've experienced that, it's almost impossible to give it up. The comfort of shared plans and automatic affection will always tempt you, but it will never outweigh the steady power of belonging completely to yourself. In the early days of solitude, being alone can feel strange or empty. The silence may feel like something is missing, and you might catch yourself checking your phone, hoping someone will remind you that you matter. Solitude tests you at first, showing you every place you've leaned on someone else to keep your life together. But that's the point. It's in those cracks that growth and true freedom begin. If you stick with being alone and resist the urge to rush back into the comfort of being needed or validated, something amazing happens. The silence stops feeling empty or punishing and starts feeling like a quiet strength you didn't know you had. This change doesn't happen suddenly. It's gradual. One day, you notice you no longer feel the pull to check in with someone before making a choice. You don't need reassurance when doubts arise because you've learned to steady yourself. This is the quiet power of independence. It's not loud, but it's unshakable. You stop relying on others for your stability and take back a freedom most people never truly experience. The Stoics knew this. Epictetus said real freedom comes when you control your own mind and desires instead of depending on outside things to feel at peace. Along with this freedom comes a calm confidence. You know you can handle life on your own. You've faced moments of doubt and long nights of questioning if you were strong enough, and you've come through unbroken. You no longer fear silence because you've learned to hear your own voice, which is now clearer, stronger, and more trustworthy than the noise of other people's opinions. This self-reliance also changes your relationships. You start choosing people who add to your life instead of completing you. Love, friendship, and connection become about sharing, not filling a gap. Jung believed that true connection can only happen between two whole individuals, each responsible for themselves. When you've met yourself fully, you can meet others without needing them to hold you up. Of course, you still feel pain, disappointment, and longing, but they no longer destabilize you. Loss no longer feels like losing yourself because you've survived being alone before. You've found richness and quiet in your inner life that no one else can give you. This also brings humility. Being self-reliant doesn't mean isolating yourself. You can accept help without feeling dependent, love without fear, and let people come and go without your foundation shaking, because your foundation is built on you, not them. The paradox of true freedom is that the more you belong to yourself, the more freely you can give to others. Your sense of time changes too. You no longer rush to fill your days to escape yourself. Even ordinary moments, a walk at dusk, a quiet meal, an evening with a book, feel full and alive. They aren't placeholders. They are life itself. When you meet this version of yourself, you realize you were never incomplete. You were just hidden by noise, distraction, and dependence. Stripping all that away reveals a self that is whole, steady, and alive. That's when you become unshakable. After that, you can't go back to a life where your peace depends on someone else. The self you've found isn't fragile. It's the strongest foundation you'll ever have. The greatest freedom comes when you see that you are already whole, and once you know it, you must protect it, live by it, and never let the world convince you otherwise. In a world where romantic relationships are often seen as the ultimate goal, it's interesting to see that some of the most thoughtful and successful people choose to stay single. They aren't waiting for a perfect partner because they understand a simple but powerful truth. Real happiness comes from within. This idea, which lines up with Stoic philosophy, helps them live fully, independently, and on their own terms. One reason they remain single is their high personal standards. They don't just look for someone with certain hobbies or traits. They want a person who truly matches their values. For people who follow Stoic principles, Relationships are not just about companionship. They are about creating a partnership that makes life better, not more complicated. A strong relationship should support both personal and shared growth, helping both people become better and live more meaningful lives. This means they seek partners who share a deep alignment in values, such as integrity, simplicity, rationality, and virtue. They aren't demanding perfection. They just won't compromise on the core principles that guide their life. Stoicism teaches that inner peace and virtue are the highest goods, so a potential partner must add to these, not take away from them. Having high standards may limit the number of potential partners, but it ensures that any relationship they form is strong, meaningful, and enriching. For a Stoic, a good relationship is straightforward, clear, and built on shared ethical values. It's not about fulfilling social expectations or temporary desires. It's about working together toward a life of purpose, clarity, and virtue. The second reason many thoughtful people stay single is that independence is extremely important to them, especially if they follow Stoic values. Independence means being free to make choices based on your own judgment and principles without having to compromise for someone else's wishes or expectations. It means keeping control over your life and making sure every decision matches your ethical and personal standards. This freedom allows them to follow their true purpose, passions, and goals without distraction or compromise. Romantic relationships, which often require adjustments and compromises, can sometimes feel limiting rather than freeing. People who value independence deeply enjoy the ability to explore, create, and grow on their own. For Stoics, the ideal is to be self-reliant and not depend on anyone else for happiness. This isn't selfishness or a rejection of connection. It's the understanding that real contentment comes from within, not from outside sources. Independence also means that if they do enter a relationship, it must respect and support their freedom, not take it away. A healthy relationship should enhance both people's independence while being loving and supportive. By prioritizing independence, they avoid being trapped by societal pressures or compromising their personal growth. This approach lets them fully focus on their life goals and philosophical pursuits, leading to a richer, more meaningful life that aligns with the Stoic idea of self-sufficiency and integrity. The third reason is that many are skeptical about how relationships work. This isn't cynicism, but careful observation based on life experience and Stoic wisdom. Stoicism teaches people to see life clearly, as it is, and to stay emotionally resilient. They notice the difficulties relationships can bring: arguments, conflicts, mismatched expectations, and emotional ups and downs. These observations make them question whether following society's standard model of romance is really necessary or fulfilling. Stoics understand that true peace and happiness come from within, not from relying on another person. This understanding often makes them prefer staying single, so they can maintain their emotional balance and inner calm without having to constantly manage the give and take of a partnership. For people who are cautious about relationships, the risk of emotional problems often seems too high, especially if they already feel complete and content in their own company. This caution also comes from doubts about whether relationships can truly meet their deep personal or philosophical needs. Stoics usually look for connections that go beyond surface-level attraction or shared hobbies. They want relationships that are intellectually stimulating, deeply respectful, and built on shared values and ethical living. Because such connections are rare and emotional stability is important to them, many Stoics are careful about entering relationships that might disturb their peace. Another reason is that many Stoics lead unique lifestyles. Whether they are minimalists, travelers, adventurers, or dedicated to special artistic or humanitarian work, living an unconventional life is often more than a preference. It's their calling. Stoicism, which emphasizes living in accordance with nature and focusing on what is under your control, strongly influences these choices. Stoic principles like self-discipline and controlling your responses to the outside world align perfectly with lifestyles that demand independence and self-reliance. For instance, a minimalist finds happiness in simplicity and essential living, which Stoicism supports by teaching that contentment comes from living according to your values, not from possessions. Nomads or people who travel often also connect with Stoic ideas about adaptability and the temporary nature of external conditions, moving through the world and finding contentment wherever they go. These unique paths often require personal conviction and focus, which can be hard to combine with the compromises and adjustments that relationships usually demand. Romantic relationships can sometimes conflict with the unconventional lives Stoics choose to live. Their desire for personal integrity and authentic living often makes relationships feel restrictive. Stoicism also emphasizes autonomy and the pursuit of personal virtue, which reinforces the choice to remain single in order to maintain freedom and stay true to one's path. For someone who follows a path less traveled, having the independence to make choices that match their Stoic values is very important. It's not that they don't want to share their lives, but their way of living requires a high level of personal integrity and alignment. Finding a partner who truly understands and shares these values can be very difficult. Another reason many choose to remain single is career commitments. For many brilliant people, their work isn't just a job. It's a calling that takes most of their time, energy, and focus. Stoic philosophy encourages discipline, purpose, and doing everything with excellence, which fits perfectly with dedicating themselves to a career. Whether they are entrepreneurs building a startup, researchers working on important discoveries, or artists perfecting their craft, their professional life is a major part of who they are and what gives them satisfaction. The intense focus required for success often leaves little time or energy for a romantic relationship. Stoics value rationality and practicality, so staying single can be a strategic choice that allows them to focus on their work without the distractions or emotional challenges that a relationship can sometimes bring. They find happiness and fulfillment in achieving their goals and living up to their own standards, rather than relying on others for contentment. Stoicism also teaches self-sufficiency and managing desires, which helps reinforce the choice to prioritize career and personal growth. By focusing on what they can control, their actions, their dedication, and their progress, they can maintain their professional independence, something that might be harder if they were committed to a romantic relationship. Many people choose to stay single because they value the freedom to manage their own money without having to combine it with a partner's finances. This isn't just about having money, it's about keeping control over their life and decisions, which is very important in Stoic philosophy. Stoicism teaches that independence and living according to your own principles are essential, and that includes financial matters. For Stoics, controlling your finances is not about getting rich, but about being able to make choices that match your values and life goals without having to compromise for someone else. Being financially independent helps people grow and live according to their own standards instead of adjusting to a partner's habits or goals. It also reduces stress, because money disagreements are a common source of conflict in relationships. Financial self-reliance allows them to live with less worry, maintain inner peace, and follow their ethical and philosophical goals, such as investing in personal development, supporting causes they believe in, or living in a way that aligns with their values. Maintaining this independence is also practical. It prepares them for life's uncertainties and gives them a secure base to pursue their goals confidently. This freedom to act without needing to negotiate or seek approval is a key part of living a Stoic life. For people who follow Stoic principles, friendships and family relationships can be deeply fulfilling. These platonic connections provide stability, understanding, and support without the emotional ups and downs often found in romantic relationships. Friends and family can share values, intellectual interests, and personal goals, which Stoics value highly. These relationships help them grow, become more self-aware, and live a virtuous life, all while maintaining independence and personal boundaries. Platonic bonds allow for meaningful companionship without creating dependence, giving space for reflection and personal growth. Stoics also often pursue unconventional goals in life, whether it's a unique career, artistic projects, or humanitarian work. These paths require focus, commitment, and sometimes solitude, which can make traditional romantic relationships difficult to maintain. Stoicism teaches self-sufficiency and the importance of following one's own nature. So many find fulfillment in these pursuits, rather than in partnership. Being single allows them to fully dedicate themselves to their passions, make decisions without compromise, and avoid distractions that could interfere with their values or objectives. Past experiences also play a key role. Stoics view previous relationships as lessons, helping them understand what truly matters and how to live in alignment with their principles. Heartbreak, betrayal, or diverging paths provide insight, guiding them to make better choices in the future and to focus on connections that support their growth and independence. In this way, singlehood becomes not a lack, but a deliberate choice to live fully, pursue one's own path, and maintain inner peace while engaging with the world on their own terms. Past experiences in relationships can teach valuable lessons, especially for people who follow Stoic principles. These experiences help them see which types of interactions and dynamics do not serve them well and show the importance of staying true to themselves. Stoics view every experience as a chance to grow. They learn that true companionship requires more than shared interests. It requires a shared outlook on life and alignment in values, which often leads them to choose singlehood. This choice is not about avoiding pain but about living a life that reflects their principles of rationality, self-sufficiency, and emotional resilience. Past relationships also reveal how deeply romantic partnerships can affect inner peace and emotional stability. Stoics prioritize maintaining a calm and tranquil mind, which is easier to achieve in independence. Choosing to remain single doesn't mean closing off from love, but rather being selective and ensuring any future relationships match their life philosophy and goals. Stoicism also teaches acceptance of things we cannot change and encourages adapting to life with grace. Learning from past experiences can mean realizing that singlehood is the best way to preserve peace, grow personally, and stay true to oneself. Another important reason is the joy of solitude. Stoics see solitude not as loneliness but as a space for reflection, self-growth, and deep engagement with their own thoughts and values. Time alone allows them to maintain clarity, balance, and integrity while planning their life according to reason rather than external pressure. Solitude gives them peace away from the noise of the world and allows for activities like reading, writing, meditating, or enjoying hobbies, which support the cultivation of virtues like patience, mindfulness, and perseverance. It also allows them to appreciate the world and nature quietly, observing life thoughtfully without needing constant interaction. For Stoics, singlehood and solitude are not about being lonely. They are about being complete within oneself, developing virtues, and living a life that is fully aligned with one's values. Choosing this path is a way of embracing independence, inner peace, and personal growth while staying true to the Stoic way of life.